All right. Hello, and welcome again to Monday Night Live, our Monday Night House of Truth Ministries Monday night live show. And tonight's topic will be on using online Bible tools. And Thayne, I'll bring up Thayne in a little bit here again to discuss that topic. And for those that are out there, House of Truth Ministries is about sharing the gospel in various venues. We often go to you know, farmers markets, street corners, uh, festivals like the La Habra Citrus Festival and Corn Festival. We're out there handing out, your standard Bible-based tracts and information on various other groups, and hoping that we can engage and have conversations with people as well. So that's what we do on House of Truth Ministries. This YouTube show is new for us, so we're getting our feet wet and trying to bring up some interesting topics. And this also, and these YouTube channels shows is really meant to be more guest driven, not so much me speaking or sharing. Uh, Occasionally, I may have to do that. So anyhow, let's go ahead and bring up Thane and get that going. All right, welcome aboard, Thane.
Good
So
evening.
welcome
Hey,
back
Jeff.
again.
Yeah.
So. Uh,
So the topic tonight, unless you want to say any more, Jeff.
Now go ahead and I'll give you the floor to start off with right now. So
Okay. Basically, Jeff asked me to put together something how to use online Bible tools. These online Bible tools are free. We're going to visit tonight three different websites to talk about things that these websites offer. Usually, when I do I guess, a basic study on either verses or words, or could even be the book of the Bible. I start at these different websites. So they have strengths and weaknesses. So I use three roughly. And so I was just going to kind of go through each of the websites, talk about their the tools that they have, and then the way I use each of these websites, where I think that's beneficial. So uh, that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
all right.
Um, Anything you want to add to this, Jeff, before we get
Uh,
started?
well, we may look at. I may bring up one other site that I visit quite a bit, and that I will you go to at times. So you can do your three, and we might just throw in a fourth one, along the way.
Well,
And
I'll let you bring that fourth one up at the end there.
yeah, I'll do it at the end. So, alrighty, go ahead and you can start with what you got. And
Okay. Okay. The first site is Bible Gateway. So give me a second here. I'm going to bring it up. We'll see if everything works correctly. Okay, Jeff, do you see it?
yeah, there we go. It should
Okay.
come on up. There we go.
Okay. So Bible Gateway is I think it's one of the easiest websites for Bible use. Um, and so generally, well, let's just start with it. Basically, you can use Bible Gateway for looking up chapters on books of the Bible. You can look up verses. You can do word searches. So and you can do a lot of things with this search. So um, this is what I use normally when I do start my Bible studies. So we can type in. I'm going to just type in. We can type in a book. Um, let's say John 3, and here comes up John 3 for the whole chapter of John 3. Okay, and you can read it. I mean, there's other things you can do, so you can go all the way through this. Let's say for whatever reason you want to look up multiple books. So let's say besides John 3, you want to use, let's go to Genesis chapter 3. So we have still John 3 there. And scroll down here. And now you also see Genesis 3. So you can do a lot of different combinations of things on this thing. You can do so that's chapters. If you can even do books. Let's say you just want to do start with just John, the whole book. And they give you options in here. So we want the book of John. So it just takes you to chapter 1, and we can scroll down. We can look at, whatever you want. You can read it. We'll talk about other things you can do in a second here. When it gets down to the end of the chapter, you see these arrows here, here, and here. You can go to the next chapter. So we're going to go to chapter 2 and go through, look at chapter 2. If you want to continue on to chapter 3 and so forth, you can do all that. For whatever reason, let's say you want to do multiple verses. So I'm going to do John again. Can't even type. I like John, but I'm going to do multiple verses. I'm going to do John 35, 335, and then I'm going to put in 10, 17, and I'm going to put in John 15, verses 9 through verse 10. And I'm going to put in John 17, 23 through 24. And then I'm going to put in also verse 26. So what you do is you can if you look at what I did, is I put the first book, so it's John, and I put 3 is the chapter 3, and then colon 35, that's a verse, comma, and you can put either chapter, in this case, chapter 10, colon, verse 17, comma, chapter 15 of John, verses 9 through 10, and then chapter 17, colon, 23 through 24, and then, I'm 26.
Yeah, I'm glad you're showing that because I was thinking of having that shown as well. So
Yeah. So, and the reason why I picked these verses is has to do with the love that the Father has for the Son. So these are basic verses in John, the book of John. It talks about the Father loving the Son. So just wanted to give you an example. If you wanted to do like a topical look up of verses, whatever topic in the Bible you were looking for, and you had the references, you could just type them all in, and then you could just kind of scroll down and read each of the verses that are related to that topic.
now, if you go back up to the beginning of this list of verses.
One second. So, okay, so everybody can, if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay. They're all there.
Now, don't change anything. Just scroll back up to the top.
Yeah.
Now, to the right of your Bible verses, you can choose the translation in which to look at them into.
Yeah, I was going to get to that, but let's do that, because that's one of the things we're going to talk about. There's many translations that Bible Gateway has. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through here, and you can kind of see all the different translations of the Bible. So if you like a particular translation, or if you want to see, whatever translation you use, you can look at what other translations other people use. So you can kind of maybe do a comparison. And that's, I'll show you in a second here, but I just wanted to let you see what all these translations, there's quite a few. And some are kind of obscure. Some, there's some that are word for word translations. Some are thought for thought. Some are very loose translations. What do they call it? Amplified translations. So there's different types of translations here. So, all right. So let's go back to real quickly here. Since I picked John 3. Change it to John 3. So we looked at the translations, and let's say for whatever reason you want to do a comparison. So we got a parallel here. And in this case, it brought up English Standard, but you can change that again for all the different translations. But the English Standard version is probably the most popular right now. They have the NIV. They have a whole bunch of different types of translations. So let's just, but this here, you can kind of compare translation to translation. So we'll just stay with the ESV. And you notice that they have their reference on the top here. So the new birth versus you must be born again. And if you go through, sometimes they have other references. So here, the NASB doesn't have "For God so loved the world." They don't add anything here, but for the ESV, they added "For God so loved the world." And then coming down, you got John's last testimony. That's how the scholars broke up on John 3 for the NASB versus John the Baptist exalts Christ. They have a little bit different, and if you wanted to look at the wording, you can see the different. I would not do the comparison here. I think another website does a better job of comparing things. If you want to kind of drill down and compare verse, let's say verse 16 of John 3:16, and look at all the different ways translators translate. So, but it is an option in this software or this website. So going back up, you can send it on Twitter if you wanted to send somebody, or Facebook, or email a chapter or verse or whatever. So here's the option here. You can print. And here it's set up to print whatever you have. So we can either go back and maybe we don't want to do comparison to parallel. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm adding, I want to take away.
Now, I don't know. I don't know if you know, but if what you're looking at now, or what you were looking at, the comparison of the two versions, that has its own link. So if you were to email the www link up there to somebody, that they should be able to click on that link and see what you just looked at with the parallel translation. Yeah.
Okay. So that was the print, and then here's the tools, and they call it page options, but so there's in this is one of those things that's really nice, because if you go print, if you have, let me give you an example. Let's go back real quick. If I turn on footnotes, and I turn on red letters, and I turn on the cross reference, we'll kind of talk about those. You see in the text here, you've got letters and parentheses. You got small versus large. You've got what Jesus says in red letters. If you go to the print, it shows all that up. If you don't want to have the references like the cross references or the footnotes or the red letters, you might want to have the red letters, because it's always nice to see what Jesus is saying. You can go back and you can turn things off real quickly. We'll leave the red letters on, and then we'll go back to print, and you can see the references are not showing, but you have to make sure you do that, because if you don't do that, they will show up in your print, or whoever you're emailing, or if you have the link on Facebook or whatever, it'll show. So those are options. I like to always have these things on when I'm doing my study, because let's say I want to know something about Nicodemus, and here's the verses. You can read them for short. They don't always print out everything on the verse, so I always click here, and then we can learn about Nicodemus, places where other places where he's referenced. So in John 7:50, talks about Nicodemus there. And then in John 19:39, again, Nicodemus. So you can find things real easy on the cross references. And then the other part, we go back and we look for, see the capital letters, those are cross references, but on the small letters, it gives you another type of potential definition. So instead of the translators in this case, they say it's signs, but it can also be used as attesting miracles. So it gives you sometimes a little bit deeper insight to the meaning of this word when it talks about sign or signs. Click. We talked about the red letters. Here's another one for again, born from above. So there's different things on this. Let's see if there's anything else. You can turn off the headings if you don't like the headings. Red letters, anything. So that's the tools. And then the other thing that's kind of nice on here is this.
Chapter 3.
This will give you.
Now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you have come from.
So this will play the whole audio of chapter 3 for the NESB, but there's other audios for different versions of the Bible. So if you just wanted to, if you were doing something at your house, let's say you're doing some, let's say you're cooking, or if you're doing yard work or something where you can put the computer nearby, you can listen to basically the Bible being read out loud of whatever chapter and whatever translation, and it's all right here. So it's real nice. Okay, so that's that. Oops, what am I doing here? Oh, I have to close this one, sorry. Okay, so that's basically the way I use Bible Gateway. Now here's, besides searching for chapters and verses and multiples, you can do word searches too. Let's do, like, let's say temple. And we do a search. And it tells you up at the top here, it says 278 Bible results. So that in the NESV, when they translated, we'll look for what the word temple is in the Greek. I don't have it off the top of my head, but in the English translation of the NESB, we can find it different places. So in Genesis 38:21, talks about temple prostitutes. Genesis 38:22, and so forth. So you can see all the different places that the translators for the NESB use this word for temple, and they're, in the Old Testament it's probably going to be Hebrew or Aramaic, and then New Testament is going to be Greek. So this is really powerful when you're trying to do it like a topical study on something, and you can go and you can look every place that whatever translation you're using, the translators, how they translated into English, that English word temple. And you over on to the right here, it talks about all the places found in the book. So in the Old Testament, there's 164. So there's 2 places found in Genesis, 4 in Judges, and so forth, all the way down here. In the New Testament, there's 114 places where temple's used for the English translation, 18 in Matthew, go to Luke, it's 19, and so forth. So it's really a neat tool to find, and you have all the verses laid out for you right here. So you can just read each one, and you can get a pretty good understanding of how when God was revealing the revelation of the Bible, how he you can see how temple might have started with maybe a single definition, and over time, like in the New Testament, might have another understanding of the word temple versus for the Old Testament versus the New Testament. So you can see the what is it? The word, how God reveals things over time, or and in different ways. So if you did a topical type study on whatever topic you wanted to cover, you could see it. So that's word studies. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Let's say you want to do a phrase. Let's think of a phrase. Let's say of the world. You don't have to put all the words in there. Sometimes I just put a couple keywords. And sometimes you're trying to find a verse, you can't remember where it's at. So you can just type in a couple of keywords, and it'll find those verses for you. So for love the world, you've got John 3:16, John 3:19, John 12:25, John 13:1, John 14:31, and so forth. There's quite a few. So it helps. So it can do just more than just one. It can do phrases. The only thing that's a little bit, I wish it would give you an option to have all the words together versus sometimes they look for verses that are not, or the words are not connected. So like in John 12:25, where you see the love there in the first line and then world, versus right here, John 3:16, it's more connected. And I should have put the word "the" in there, but so that's another strength that this has. So I use this for searching for words as well as reading either chapters or verses real quick. And one more thing on this is, let's say for John 3:16, I want to see what the verses before and after, so I can hit context here. And it'll give me usually one for the verse before and the one verse behind or after it, depending on if it's connected or not. And if I go back, I can do the whole chapter. So I want to see more of the context of how John 3:16 is being used in the context, which is very important because just reading a verse out of the context can give you a misleading understanding of that verse. So it's very important to have the verses read in context. And sometimes you got to read more than just the verse before or verse after. You might have to read, paragraphs before. So anyways, but you need to read it in context. So if you wanted to do the whole chapter, sometimes at the beginning of the chapter, or the end of the chapter, so many times you got to go to the chapter before or the chapter after to get the whole context too. Other translations. So if you want to see other translation, here's kind of a nutshell of all the different translations, how they translated John 3:16. I still think there's another website that does a better job. So, but just to let you know, it's here if you wanted to use it. Let's see, anything else? Oh, the list of books. You have all the books of the Bible here. You can do your search that way. And then in the major topics of the chapters, like for Genesis 1, it's creation, chapter 2, the creation of man and woman, chapter 3, the fall of man, chapter 4, Cain and Abel, and so forth. So that's kind of a helpful thing. Sometimes if you can't remember, it's in Genesis somewhere, let's say Noah and the ark or whatever. You can kind of come over here and you can kind of look and you see Noah, descendants of Noah. Here's the flood. let's say you wanted to know about the flood. Should say no on the flood, but it's just the flood.
Oh, by the way, since we're on the topic here, I have one of my silly questions again, but
Sure.
um, I got a question to ask, and if the audience wants to put it in the comment section, so don't answer it. All right. But the question is this: how many of each type of animal did Moses bring on the ark? If you can type it in the chat, we'll give you a few minutes, and then we'll let Thayne answer it. Okay. Go ahead, guy. Go ahead, Thayne.
Okay. The last part on the Bible Gateway, over here on the right, this is more for if you wanted to pay for the service of using Bible Gateway. I think they charge, I think it's $4 or $5 a month to get this, what they call the Plus. And what it does is opens up these different options to the right. But there's things that are free, and this ESV Reformed Study Bible, this is really good. Let me get back to John chapter 3. Which I wish they wouldn't have charged on some of this stuff, but so this is free. But if you go to the ESV Reformed Study Bible, there's 22 entries, it says, on John chapter 3. And depending on what verse you wanted to study, we were looking at John 3:16. There's some quick little notes here. So in the study Bible, if you bought this Bible, you would see this note. But the notes are really good in the ESV Reformed Bible Study Bible.
And I just got a copy of that too. Just came in the mail a
So
couple weeks ago.
So you can read this, and these are very helpful to help someone understand some of the things going on in that particular verse, assuming they cover whatever topic you're concerned about. They're simple. I think they do a really good job explaining and why. So just to let you know, it's there. I know there's always debates on different things. So it talks about a lot of different topics depending on what verse you're studying. So I just want to make you aware of that. The other thing here, oops, too far. I just wanted to get out of it. There's a couple other things that are pretty nice in here too. The pluses don't work. So if they have a plus and a box with a plus, they don't work. But here's, okay, the Encyclopedia of the Bible, it's got 104 entries. And depending on, these are just topics. You can pick whatever one you want. And let's see, I don't know. You see anything that interests you, Jeff? I like depravity. It talks about depravity here, and it talks about places, what depravity is, some verses, references, talks about here the biblical history of man's depravity. So it's a nice rundown on a topic of all these, and it's got quite a bit there. So if you ever wanted to know this is a little topic or a little write-up on a topic. So you could do, or the deity of Christ. And it talks about some of the history behind some of the struggle about using wording for the different confessions, and how they struggle with trying to come up with words to describe the deity of Christ. So I thought that was pretty neat. And then, I don't know how to get it back in. Let's see, study. Oops. No, not going to let me do it. Okay. I don't know how to exactly get back out of there. Okay, so the last one I think here is Bible themes. Yeah. So we got encyclopedia. I didn't care for the Asbury Bible commentary. Bible panorama, I'm not sure what that, I hadn't checked that out. But I did, Matthew Henry is pretty good, but there's other places where they have, I think, better commentaries, at least that are you can use easier. Okay, here's the Bible themes. I thought this was a pretty interesting one, and so in here, it's tied to the, I believe, the Strong's concordance, using different numbers. So if you knew what number, let's say you're studying a word and you're using it, Strong's, and you wanted to see if they had an entry in here. So I'm assuming water's tied to this number here. So let's go. I wanted to go back to, who was it? God is judge. And this is interesting. As part of his sovereignty and authority, God is executor of his righteousness within the created order. Christ shares in his ongoing work. And here's some of the different verses related to God as judge, decides disputes, he presides in the heavenly court, and so forth. So there's quite a few things here. And what's nice is you can just click on these verses. You don't have to go look them up. You just click on them and they'll bring them up so you can read them, which is really helpful because I'm kind of a lazy person in the sense of looking up scripture. I mean, a couple scriptures fine, but if you got a whole bunch, it's so nice to just click on these things and have them come up, and you can read them real quick and see if you agree with what they're talking about. Like here, God is judges the rulers of the nations. And if you read these verses and see if they really say what this person, when they put this thing together, if you agree that the verse or the verses are talking about that or not. So it's real helpful when you do a study. If you're going to do a study and you wanted to see, he judges angels and see if these verses are related to that, or he judges Satan. So there's a lot of good information, assuming that the references are good. You could see real quickly. But look at all that. His sovereignty, his power, his holiness, his anger. There's a ton of good information here. If you're putting together something and you wanted to focus on his mercy, or maybe just his attributes. Look at all those. Anyways, so that is the Bible Gateway and the different options and references, study tools there for Bible Gateway. The next one, let me get out of here. Yeah, give me a second here because I got to.
All right, Thayne. Whoops, you still there, Thayne? Or okay. All right, hey guys, hang in there. Thayne will come back up in a moment. He's getting used to this. But anyhow, I want to let you know that you could put comments or questions in the chat over here to the right of your screen. Or if you want to come up live, you can come up and be seen like you see me or Thayne. Or you can come up and talk, and then you won't be seen physically, but you can. I'll be right with you, Thayne. I'm just taking advantage of the break here for a moment. All right, so then you can come up and speak like this and not be seen physically, but we're going to put the link in the show when Thayne is done to let people come up and talk if they want to talk live, or just put stuff in the chat so we can catch it later. All righty. So, alrighty, I'm going to bring back up Thayne. Everything, you back now.
Yeah, sorry about that. Clicked the wrong link, cut me off. Okay, so now we're in Bible Hub.
All right, here we go.
You see that, Jeff?
Yep, got it. It's up there. Okay. There you go.
So in Bible Hub, this is probably where the website that I do the most study on when I online. It's got a lot of useful tools. So we're just going to kind of cover things real quickly here in the sense of, so at the bottom of this website page, you got Bible study tools, and it's got Apocrypha, it's got Atlas, it's got Bible, commentary, concordance, devotions, dictionary, encyclopedia, Greek, Hebrew, interlinear, interwoven, library, measures, multilingual, part gospels, pictures, reading plan, search, sermons, Bible, state Bible, Strong's, timeline, and topical. So the way to use this is more of instead of a book by book, this is like when you're digging into understanding a verse of a Bible, or let's say you wanted to do a word study that's on a certain word in a verse. So let's just, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to look at, let's see, Luke 18, verse 14. Okay, and it brings up this screen, and this screen is very helpful. This is where, when I do my studies on verses, on the left-hand column, it gives you all these translations of the same verse. And so you can see, like, the NIV says this. If you go to the New Living Translation, all the verses are the same verse and all the different translations. And what I do when I'm looking at this is I'm looking to see how the translators of these different translations, how they translated that particular verse. And I'm looking for differences. Sometimes they're very minor, and basically there's no difference, and it's just how things are worded. But sometimes you see that there are some fairly substantial differences. And the reason why I'm looking for this is because if the translators don't see much difference or I don't see much difference in the translations, then I know that they're basically in agreement, or there's harmony on the translators translating. But if I see differences, it alerts me to start looking at, why are there these differences? Sometimes there might be differences in how to translate a particular word. In this case, it would be Greek, and say whatever the word is. And then we could dive in and study that particular word in Greek and the different definitions it has, and why some scholars might translate it this way, other translators might translate that way. Sometimes it might be grammar. Some translators might be, I'm going to use English because I don't really know the Greek, but the difference between present tense and future tense, and so they might be translating it different ways that way. And so at least you're aware that there's something up, that these translators are trying to bring out, that since we don't read Greek, most of us, or Hebrew or Aramaic, we want to know when there's some debate on how to translate this into English. And so that gives us a key. So I really enjoy reading the different ways translators translate. And you've got, in these translations, you've got the literal translations, where they're trying to do that word for word translation. Some translators are doing the thought for thought translation. Some are more of the amplified, or the looser. They're trying to put it in the vernacular of today sometimes, where people can understand, versus culturally something that, unless somebody explained the culture, you would not understand. So they're trying to equate it to something today that we can relate to. So that's what I like looking at this. And I mean, look at all these different translations. And if you want more, you got the modern translations, and this is what they're in that column. You've got the classic translations in the middle column, and then you got the literal translations to the far right. And you can just go down, and there's quite a few. And you can see all the different ways that translators are trying to translate the same Greek words into English. And you got Catholic translations from Aramaic, New Testament translations, modern or early modern translations.
Yeah, and a lot of times these different wording is what we would say synonyms. Essentially, they're saying the same thing, but with just different words. You find that idea there too?
Yeah, that's again, sometimes it's just wording and they're saying the same thing. Sometimes there are some differences, and that's why I like this, because I want to know about the differences. I want to know why, let's say, translators, let's say the NIV and the ESV, they're in agreement, but when it comes to the New American Standard, it's saying something a little bit different. And it might be it might be subtle, or it might be more straightforward or clear in the sense of no, they're saying something different. And so I want to know, because I'm not a translator. I have to rely on translators communicating the original language to my language, which is English. And so I have to rely on these translators translating it correctly. And since I'm not a translator, we sit there and we read different translations, and sometimes basically, most of the time they're saying roughly the same thing, but sometimes there's these differences. So I want to know. And then that helps me grasp something, in the sense of these translators see something a little bit different. And so they're trying to, when they translate it into English, bring attention to that. And so that should to me, it sets an alarm off. Okay, why is there this apparent, it's not a big disagreement, maybe there's some disagreement how to translate. And then that helps me to kind of dive in and say, okay, what's the issue here? Why does some translators see it a little bit different than others? So that's why I wanted to show you this kind of tool. The other thing that's kind of nice.
Okay. Let me go ahead and just pause. Pause for a moment.
Sure.
For the audience sake, in talking about different translations and how they're defined, in the show comment notes, there's a link to one of our newsletters, and in this, it's our recent newsletter, and the author there of the article that I put in the newsletter discusses a lot of things about different commentaries, liberal, good commentaries, some questionable commentaries, Bible translations, defining which categories certain Bible translations belong into, just similar to what Thayne here was talking about. So after the show's over, if you want to go grab our newsletter, it's in the show link, in the show notes here. You can go read the article in our September newsletter. So, all right, go ahead.
Okay. So if I go to the right column, they put a translation in here. Usually it's the Berean, but it's nice to see the verse, which we're talking about, verse 14 of Luke chapter 18. But you can see the context. They put a verse before and after, so you can kind of read it in the context. The other thing is they have the cross references in already up as verses. Now this is, I don't know who put this together, but usually each translation has sometimes different cross references listed. So I'm not sure who's putting this up, but I find it helpful, because what that does is, if I'm looking at this subject and it's talking about this was a parable about Jesus. I forgot who he was talking to, but he's comparing in this parable the Pharisee versus the tax collector. He went in the temple to pray. The Pharisee basically talks about that he did certain things, that he tithed, that he forgot what the other things were, but his works before God when he was praying in the temple to God, and he says, "I'm glad I'm not like this tax collector over here. I tithe. I forgot. There's a couple other things he did, and so he's glad he's not like the sinner next to me." And then the next thing we know, he's talking about, or then the tax collector prays to God, and he says, "God, forgive me or have mercy upon me, a sinner." They both leave the temple, and then Jesus asks, "Who was forgiven, or who was justified? Was it the tax collector that had these works, or was it was it the Pharisee that had these works, or the tax collector that had no works? He just came with his sins, and he cried out to God, have mercy upon him." And this is one of those verses that I use when I share with Jehovah's Witnesses, because there are people who say they believe in God, and they follow God, and they try to serve him out of good works and trying to be acceptable to God through good works. And this parable shows that the one that didn't have any works was acceptable to God because he cried out and asked God, have mercy upon him, a sinner. And that should be our heart right there as Christians, because we are not acceptable to God except through our mediator, Christ. And we basically say, have mercy upon us. We're sinners. We have nothing good before us. So in that sense, that's just why I like looking at these verses. I like to look at the cross references. They're all right there really easy. This treasury of scripture here, sometimes this is helpful in the sense of when we have little that get into the words like went, and they might have some type of references where other verses are talking about that same in the subject went, or justified, talking about there, or every. So there's a bunch of different things right here. So that's kind of this page. Now this is the besides the parallel verses from the different translations. I think that's the strength of this website. The other is the interlinear. And the interlinear, this is awesome. This gets, since we don't know the original language, and here's the original language here. Here's your Greek for verse 14 of Luke chapter 18. And then right above it is what they call the English transliteration. So you're turning Greek letters into English letters so you can pronounce it. And then under down here, you can see the English of how the translators, in this case, I don't know which translator's translating this, but this is what the English. So it's basically a word for word translation, basically. And then up here, the same. So this word is tied to all this information here. So this is in the English is Lego. So that's how you pronounce that. Here's the Strong's number. And then here's the parsing. So it has to do with the grammar. And you can see that. So let's look at the Strong's number. You click it. Okay, and what it does is it may be a little bit different here because this is what I call the basic word, and then the endings usually change depending on how it's being used grammatically. It could be plural, it could be singular, it could be past tense, future tense, depending on if it's noun or verb or how it's being used. But here's, in this case, lega, the transliterations here, the part of speech is it's a verb. The phonics spelling, I guess, Lego. The rough definition is to say, but you can see how it's how translators can translate it different ways depending on the context of how it's being used. So that's the Strong's information. It also has helps, which is the word study, and it'll give you some definitions here. I look at that, but I don't really use that to try to find out what the meaning of the word is. It has the NAS exhaustive concordance, and you can say, again, basic definitions to say. Here's the NASB translation. So when the translators of the NASB, depending on how it's being used in the context, it can be translated. They translate it addressing or agree or ask. And each of these, it's used one time that way, agree one time that way, ask one time, asked 3 times, and so forth. You can see all the different ways that the translator, the NASB translators translated that particular word, Lego, in the NASB Bible. Now, here's the word I use quite a bit. I use Thayer's Greek lexicon. And what a lexicon is, think of that as our Webster's dictionary with helps. Okay, so basically, a lexicon is going to show whatever the word is. In this case, it's this word, which is, again, part of Lego. And it's going to give you all the different definitions. We'll go through here. There's a lot of stuff here that are written more for scholars. But then we get into the definitions with an accusative, which that gets into the grammar of the object. And then it talks about some of these different definitions. And I should have picked let me pick a word that I know a little bit about, because I'm not a scholar on this. I'm going to pick, one is justified and the other one is, one is justified and the other is going to be this humbled. And the reason why I'm picking these is the Jehovah's Witness Bible, the New World Translation. When they got down to in this discussion or illustration with the Pharisee and the tax collector, the last verse 14, it said, I tell you, this man, talking about the tax collector, this man went down to his home and was proven more righteous. And that's not a very good translation. It's kind of a misleading translation. Instead of saying was justified or declared righteous. So this is where it's talking about this. And then the last part of it was more righteous than that Pharisee, because everyone who exalts himself will be humiliated. So that's, instead of humiliated, will be humbled. And whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So I wanted to see, because in the Jehovah's Witness Bible, there's many places where they translate it, to me, purposely wrong. And it's not necessarily wrong if you do a word study, because these words have multiple definitions. The question is, are they using the right definition that fits the context? And that's where it gets critical, because if you have a misunderstanding where, in this case, where it says that or in the New World Translation, it says that the tax collector was more righteous. If you remember in the story, the tax collector came before God, was praying, and he says, forgive me or have mercy upon me, a sinner. He doesn't have any works. So it's kind of misleading in the sense of who was more righteous. the idea is, who did God justify or declare righteous? Not because they were righteous, but who did he declare righteous? And so that's why I want to look at this. So we're going to look at justified here, and they say more righteous. And if you look at these, it's a verb. Basically, it says to show to be righteous, which that's what the New World Translation is trying to say, versus on the other end of the spectrum, declared righteous. And it's dikeo. And again, the definitions is it in the context is to make righteous, defend the cause of being righteous, plead for the righteousness, the innocent, acquit, justify, hence I regard as righteous, which is more like declared. And then you got these different studies. Again, we went through some of this, but I'm going to go down to Thayer's. And what we're going to do, what's good about the lexicon is the person that's putting, or person or persons that are putting together the lexicon, they're giving you what they call a range of definitions, range of meanings. So in this case, you got 1, 2, 3, there's 3A, 3B. And then you got number 1, I'm not sure why that, and number 2, but usually there's a range of different meanings. So the question is, which definition fits the context? And look at all the in the blue, they're Bible references. And so the lexicon here, they're giving examples of if you pick a particular definition, they're showing verses where where they found the usage in the context that fits that definition. And so you can, I don't want to get into reading all the different definitions here, but if you go down to the one where it talks about, where is it? I'm looking for Luke 18:14. I just found it. I'm not seeing it. Okay, Luke 18:14. So see, it's down here. So basically, it's saying that the definition. I go back up. It's B. So it's go to the number first. So it's saying to declare, pronounce one to be just, righteous, or such as he ought to be, and then it starts breaking it down. So it put it under B. So there's two differences, or there's subtle differences in that definition. The second part of the subtle definition, with a positive idea predominant, to judge, declare, pronounce righteous, therefore acceptable. And we see if we go down here again to Luke 14, it's talking about, in Luke 18:14 teaches that a man, this is the word for justified, by deep sorrow for his sins, which so humbles him that he hopes for salvation only from divine grace. That's that unmerited favor. So it's not based on his works, but on God's undeserved kindness that he's showing to this tax collector. That all the tax collector has is sins. There's nothing good in him. He should be judged. But God shows that he's going to show mercy and he's going to justify him. He's going to declare him righteous. So that's pretty awesome, because that's us. We are the tax collector. All we have, all we bring before God is our sinfulness. You know, I forgot the verse, but it talks about our righteousness as filthy rags, and that's our righteousness. So the other one I wanted to show, kind of going back here, getting back to the Jehovah's Witness understanding, is where they say that you're, in their translation, it says humiliated, and this is will be humbled. And I wanted to see, because It does have, on the usage, it can be humiliated. And it's a verb, and here's the word, I don't know how to pronounce it. But the whole point is when you translate, you got to get have the right, when you're translating from Greek into English or Hebrew into English, you've got to give the right understanding to the reader. So in our case, it's English. So English readers, we need to understand because we don't know the original language. So we're trusting the translators. So if the translators blow it and they give us the wrong understanding, it really hurts us when we start to try to connect the dots. So this is very important. So yes, the word can have the meaning humiliated, but in the context, is humiliated the correct understanding of that context for the word being used, or is it more being humbled? So again, I go down to the Thayer's lexicon, and I look for, and here it is again. So it helps me find which definition to use. Now Thayer's doesn't put every single Bible reference where that word is found. They're just giving you typical verses for whatever particular definition they're trying to, or a range of definitions they're trying to show you which definition to use of that range. So in this case, it's metaphorically to bring into a humble condition, reduced to meaner circumstances, i.e., to assign a lower rank or place to abase, and so forth and so on. If you go here to humble or abase myself, and they gave an example, fugal living, which is not what that verse, what the tax collector is doing, but he's crying out to God to have mercy. Anyway, so it's here. This is very good. I would recommend, besides Thayer's is good in the sense of lexicons, but there's a lot of other lexicons out there. So I would get a couple of good lexicons, but this is where one is free. Most of the lexicons are older, about the late 1800s, but they're still used today. They all seem to regurgitate. They'll combine different lexicons together from different scholars, past scholars, and come up with different definitions. So you'll see some of the range of definitions a little bit different. Sometimes they're more detailed. They'll instead of, let's say, 3 definitions, they might have 5 or 7 definitions because one scholar sees it, tries to put finer understanding on the range of definitions. Some don't. So it's always good to have a couple of good lexicons when you're doing your study. What's nice to have it online is you can search for it pretty fast, and you can find it. And here's all the verses that are related to this understanding. So you can, besides Luke 18:14, there's others here that you can look at and see if you're in agreement. Some of this helps just to understand the definitions. Just go read the verse in context, and then you can start to see real quickly or understand the definition that this person that's putting together the lexicon, Thayer in this case, what he sees. So it's good to see that. The other thing that's good on some of this is on the right column. This is the Englishman's Concordance. And what they've done is here's the Greek. Here's the NES, that's the New American Standard, King James, and the I think it's the International New Testament. I'm not sure. Maybe I butchered that. But here's different translations. You can see how this particular word, which is again humble, so you can see how it's being used. You can see the grammar here. But the other thing is you can see what Englishman Concordance does is it starts to show you all the places where that word this word here, actually it's this word here, or the endings will be different, but basically, was it Tapinoa, however you pronounce that. Here's all the places, at least in the New Testament, where you can find that word. And you can, if you wanted to, if you're doing some type of a word study, because sometimes you want to see how maybe how Jesus uses it, maybe how Paul uses it, maybe in John how he uses it, because and you can read and you can see the different ways, because you're going to see a range of meanings based off of how a word is being used in the context. So it's always good to see. Now they're saying out of this, there's 14 places where it's found. And then here's the different ways. If you look at the endings of these words, this gets into how the grammar is being used. So you can see different ways. So if I wanted to go back to this, and I can see the ending here, which is this word, the English transliteration of it. So let me see if I can go find that, if it's used more than just once. Oops, wrong way, sorry. Yeah, it's this word right here, and it's used 4 times. So if I hit that, I can find the 3 other places where that same word is being used. And here they are. And see, I can see if I can start comparing, and I can see if it has the same definition, if it's being used the same way on all these verses, or if it's being understood, or it has, again, a range of meanings. I'm looking for something. If I'm making trying to do a study, it'd be nice to say every place where this word is found in, let's say, Luke, because 3 of them are found in Luke. The author of Luke, when he uses that particular Greek word, it always means this. If I'm trying to make an argument to support whatever the way I'm understanding it. So that's one way. Usually that doesn't happen, but there are times where many places there's usually some type of same thinking from the author, but sometimes there's not, or most of the time it's not, but there are sometimes. Anyways, so I think that's it on that. Let me see. Okay. Okay, let's go back. So that's the interlinear. You got, this is New Testament, so it's Greek. You could also have Old Testament. Instead of Thayer's is New Testament, Greek. Let's go to one that's Old Testament, so you can see a little bit different. Let's see here. Let's go, let's say Genesis 3. Okay, so this is Old Testament, so we're going to get into Hebrew, and we get basically the same things that we saw under Luke 18:14 for New Testament. So now, but if we go to the interlinear, notice that the lettering, this is Hebrew lettering, and the other thing you have to notice on the Hebrew is it's reverse. In Greek and in English, we read from left to right. In Hebrew, it's from right to left, and it bugs the heck out of me, because if I tried to read this, the English underneath the Hebrew words, it gets really choppy, and sometimes it's very hard to follow. Even sometimes the Greek is a little bit easier to read. It is sometimes choppy, but with the Hebrew, it gets real choppy. And I mean, look at the lettering. This is really tough. And then how you try to pronounce it. But it does have the Strong's numbering. And so let's just take the woman here. So here is the Hebrew word for woman. And to pronounce it is Isha. And it's a noun feminine. It generally means woman, wife, female. Now, if we want to do a word study, instead of Thayer's, it's Brown's, Driver, and Briggs. And so it's a little bit different. This is, again, a lexicon, but it's for the Old Testament. And here's the different definitions, woman, and here's the examples of verses that are related to that. Here's wife, second definition, and all the verses that can be related to that. Third definition, female of animals. And here's an example in Genesis 7:2. Fourth definition, with a distributed or reciprocal sense, each woman from her neighbor. And there's a bunch of different little things in here. So I just wanted to show you that it's, for Old Testament, it's Hebrew, or sometimes it's Aramaic, but it's a different, in this case, it's a different lexicon. And what else? Same Englishman concordance you wanted to look at, usage. So that's what we have with that. Just moving on real quickly, let's get back. So that's kind of the usage. Now it's going to go down to some of these tools here. You have the Apocrypha. This Apocrypha is Old Testament Apocrypha. So the difference between a Protestant Bible and a Roman Catholic Bible is these additional books in the Old Testament. Well, if you wanted to do a study on the Apocrypha, you can go in here. Since I'm Protestant, I don't hold to that. It's, I think, Jerome, he didn't want to put it in the, I believe it was the Latin Vulgate he put together for the Roman Catholic Church. He put these footnotes at the beginning of the books and basically said that the Jews did not recognize these as authoritative. They did recognize them as beneficial for believers to read, but not for doctrinal purposes. So, and the Roman Catholic Church came along and said, no, we think they're authoritative. So they made them the books of the Bible. Anyways, so Atlas, this is good if you wanted to do maps, or if you wanted to find, so let's say we want to know about maybe Jericho. It's got Jericho. Look if I spelled it right. And here's different sites where you can look up a map for Jericho. And they'll tell you about it in the encyclopedia, at least in this particular case. And you can just zoom in. And you can kind of look at where Jericho is on the map. And so that's kind of nice. And so when you're reading things in the Bible and you want to kind of understand what they're talking about, if it's towns, if it's rivers, if it's seas, if it's regions, you want to know what it is, what's going on. That's what's nice about the Atlas. We talked about the Bible. We talked about different translations. I was going to skip that. Commentaries. This is, I like this. I wouldn't go here, but it does show you different commentaries. I use this one here. Let's go back to, let's see, was it Luke 18, 14. Say you're doing a study and you want to you kind of understand what's going on. You've done your preliminary kind of study. But you want to see what other scholars. Now, what's listed here at the top, here's all the commentaries that Bible Hub has. These are public domain, so they're open. Basically, most of this stuff is old. Some of it is kind of outdated. Some of it I don't necessarily like. But I think there's some good ones in here. I think Alfred's probably pretty good. Calvin's pretty solid. I like the Cambridge that gets into more of the looking at the wording, the word studies. Just going back to Calvin. Calvin was a scholar both in Greek and Hebrew. So he's what he tries to do is break down things for the common person to understand. So he doesn't get necessarily in word studies, but he is usually right on his understanding of whatever author of the Bible you're reading, and he explains things. I found him really good on Colossians 1:15, where it talks about where Jesus is in the image of the invisible God. Jehovah's Witnesses have a certain interpretation on that. But Calvin nails this thing in the sense of explaining what Paul is trying to say there. And I thought, I've never come across anybody that's done such a good job on that. Calvin did an excellent job. Expositor's okay. Gield's pretty good. ICC, this is the, when you get into commentaries, there's different levels of commentaries. The highest level is the critical commentary, I'm trying to think of it. I'm drawing a blank. I'll think of it. But this is where, if you are going to buy a commentary, it's probably not good for the beginner. It's very technical. They get into word study. They get into the Greek, the grammar, the tensing. They get into different ways scholars understand or interpret certain things, and they usually are critical in the sense of they'll say why they don't think it's this understanding or this interpretation, but it should be this interpretation. So it's not necessarily easy read, but it will help you if you are trying to really dig in and understand what the author's trying to say. Exegetical commentaries. So ICC is an old, it's like, again, late 1800s, but it's probably got a lot of good information in there, but it's not easy read. Oops, I do it back here. Okay, so let's see, is anything more? The ones I do like, I like the Cambridge one. It's not necessarily a lot of word, but it gets down to trying to explain things. If you're looking at certain words, hopefully they're covering the words that you're interested in and explain certain things there. So I thought that was really good. Matthew Henry's pretty good. It has more of a simplistic way of explaining things. It doesn't necessarily get into the real details, but it's usually pretty spot on. Barnes Notes is usually good. Jamie Fawcett and Brown, some of this stuff, they've got some gold nuggets in some of their, usually it's not a very, I think it was, I want to say one volume, maybe it was 3 volumes anyways when it was printed, but it has some pretty good information at times in there. The pulpit commentary, it's usually pretty good. Gill's exposition on the entire Bible is pretty good. I don't know about the Geneva. I never used it. So that's different things there for commentaries. What else we got here down here? Oops, something's going on. There we go. Concordance, we kind of talked about some of the concordance. They're already built in. Dictionaries are kind of built in. Trying to look at my notes here. What was worth going into? So on the concordances, you have Strong's, you have Englishmen, you have the New American Standard, as was all covered earlier when we were doing word studies. I don't usually do devotions, but if people like devotions, you can look at that. Dictionaries kind of cover that. Encyclopedias kind of cover that. Hebrew and Greek kind of with the interlinears. I usually go to the interlinear. We covered that. Library. What was good with the library, and this gets kind of my next website coming up, but you can look at all the different things that are covered here. So there are early church fathers. If you had a certain writer that you were interested in, you can find it here. You can look up what they wrote. So these are early church fathers. Early church fathers are usually from, if you're lucky, in the early, probably not first century, probably second century, third century. And then the Nicene Fathers, I don't know if they got into the Nicene Fathers in here yet. There's quite a bit of, Nicene Fathers, post-Nicene. So this is probably the 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, and maybe later. So again, the different writers at that time. Clementine literature, apocryphal writings. Now this is the New Testament Apocrypha, which was not accepted by the Roman Catholic Church. Highly questionable if they're even necessarily Christians that wrote it. Probably more like Gnostic type writers. But you have it here. You can kind of look through it. You'll usually notice a big difference between the biblical writers of the New Testament versus these writers. And so you can see pretty quickly why the New Testament church and early church or apostolic church did not accept these. And a lot of times they were written kind of later on. But you hear people today talk about, well, you're missing, this book or whatever. So this is where you could find the information if you wanted to read on what they were. And you could probably point out there's a bunch of things in there that don't line up with the teachings of the New Testament. Oops. Come on. Moving on. This is interesting with measurements. Sometimes when you're reading in there on the Bible, they'll use different measurements. So again, for like lengths, here's the reference, Bible reference where you find it, but they use finger, handbreadth, span, cubit, long cubit, rod, fathom, furlong, stadium, Sabbath day's journey. That's what kind of comes up. Ever wanted to know what a Sabbath day's journey was? It's 2,000 cubits or 3,000 feet roughly, or meters. You can find it. They all have conversions if you ever wanted to try to convert something. A day's journey was roughly 20 miles. Weights, there's all the different ones. Shekel, mina, talent. So these are the ones I'm familiar with and what they are, how much they weigh and stuff. Liquid measurements, I don't remember any of those. Oh, one of these, maybe it was core. Anyways, find them here. Dry measurements, money, drachma, talent, either gold or silver, denarii. So you can find the references there. Kind of interesting. Oh, time. This is always sometimes confusing depending on, the events, to me, you see this a lot when you get close to Jesus' crucifixion. They talk about different times in there, so you can kind of see the references. So that's time. That's measurements. Parallels in the gospel. This is kind of interesting too. If you want, basically the harmony of the gospel. So basically, there's things. Here's the kind of the topics, but if you pick one of these topics that you can relate to, let's say, beginning of John's preaching, you can find the verses. In this case, there's only two where it talks about beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, in Mark 1:1, and then over here, a little bit more detail in that beginning of John's ministry. I don't even see John there. Oh yeah, God came to John. Okay, doesn't talk about John there, so I don't know why they're bringing that up. But let me see if I can find more of a better example. Maybe Nick. No, that's a good one. Who's a crucifixion would be good. Let's see if Jesus walks on water. See if they're okay. Here's three. So in three different gospels, it talks about Jesus walking on the water. So here's the references. You can see, and you can kind of compare. Sometimes they add information. Sometimes they say the same thing. Sometimes they're missing information. Or oops, they keep doing that. Doggone. Sometimes they're not saying everything. So it's good to sometimes look at parallels, because it's certain gospel writers put more details than others. So it's always good to compare the incident that's going on and see the details. Let's say, like in this case, it looks like Matthew's got more detail than clearly John does, but John might have a couple details that Matthew may not have. So it's always good to read all the different references to the same event and see the similarities and also the differences. So that's the parallel of the Gospels. And I mean, there's quite a bit of different subject matters here. So you can kind of look at what you want and then go from there. And then, did I have any more? Oh, I skipped. I didn't like any of this stuff. You can look it up your own. But I did like the topical. And again, it was under Bible Gateway, but let's say, for whatever reason, there's three different topical Bibles here that they can reference. So if you wanted to talk about, I was just testing. I put Nineveh in. Oops, can't spell it. Let's put let's put on resurrection. Wanted to know about the resurrection. So you have all these references here that you can look up. So in the Easton Bible Dictionary, it talks about what that, the concordance, different, there's 42 places. And I'm assuming it's the New American Standard where it's found. Actually, it's found in these. Oh, I guess it tells you the translations where you can find the word resurrection. Talks about the different places when it talks about the resurrection, two disciples on the way to Emmaus. Let's see, usually there's more, quite a bit here on resurrection. Christ's resurrection secures and illustrates that of his people. There's Webster's Revised Unabridged Dictionary, so that There's the ISBE, the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. Talks about resurrection there. I guess how it's used in different places in the Bible. So there's a lot there. Anyways, there's a lot of information if you wanted to read all this. Quite a bit kind of gives you a lot. This is all free on Bible Hub. So anyways, we keep going. I know there's probably other references down here because I was looking for the Nave's topical Bible, and that helps look up certain subjects. I don't know. Anyways, I have a feeling it just keeps going for a long ways. Let's see if they have it. And it's changing some borrowing. Anyways, so that's the Bible Hub in a nutshell. And all the things you can do with it. I usually do word studies and I look at the original language using that and look for translation differences in translation of a particular verse. And that helps me note if the translators see something different between when they're trying to translate into English versus not. So those are the main things that I use Bible Hub for. The last site, let me switch out of here. Let's see if I do this thing right. Oops, I got to stop screen. And now I got to share. Last website, it's almost done. Sorry, it's kind of dragging on here. Is this one. This is the Christian Classic Ethereal Library. Now, this has to do more for studying writings or documents of the early church or Christian church. Maybe it should be better. So, how we saw the apostolic, the apostolic fathers, which are the early. So they're basically after the apostles, you have the apostolic fathers. So they're like the first, maybe sometimes second generation Christians that were trained by the apostles, or within 100 years or so of the apostles. Then you get into the Nicene fathers and the post-Nicene fathers and stuff. So these are writers, and at that time you can see the things that the church was dealing with, the early church was dealing with. So what's that?
Okay, I got.
Anyways, so the way to use this real quick, since we're running out of time, it's got Bible biographies, creeds, and catechisms, commentaries. Christian. I don't use a lot of this. What I would recommend, I like the creeds and catechisms.
All right, Thayne, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I've been trying to get your attention verbally for a while. I don't know why when I unmuted, why you couldn't hear me.
Nope, couldn't hear you.
Okay, so now I just want to make sure that thing's working. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, so creeds and confessions. I like this because the church, from the time of the apostles on, had let's see, the early church, the first century, second century, they had what they called the regula fide or fide. What that means is the rule of faith, and which I would recommend that we have today, but we really don't. The point of that doctrine or that concept was, how do you know a person is a Christian. Everybody that, at least today, you run into those that say they are Christians. How do you know they're Christians? Back then, to be a member in the Christian church wherever you're at. So if you were in Jerusalem, and you went to the church, or use their house, essentially house churches early on, and then they developed into bigger churches in the particular buildings, maybe, whatever. They had to believe certain things to be considered a Christian. And so what the early church fathers did was they looked at what the apostles taught when they went sharing, when after Jesus died, they went out to different areas and they would share basically about Christ, but teachings. Paul taught a lot of different things. John taught things. Peter taught things. The writer of Hebrews taught things. Anyways, they had these basic teachings, and you would have to believe these basic teachings before you could join the church and be considered a Christian. So that's why I like creeds and confessions, because the whole point of creeds and confessions is usually it's not the Bible. It's a summary or an interpretation of the way the early church understood the teachings of the apostles. And they wanted to pass that on. Hey, Jeff, you're making lots of noise. I can hear you. So some of the early, you had the Apostles' Creed. You had the Athanasian Creed, which kind of came later. We got this is one of the early Protestant confessions, kind of a late Protestant confession, the London Baptist Confession. The Synod of Dort. This is more of the Reformed churches. This is kind of in Europe at the time, right during the Protestant or the Reformation or the Protestant or there's believers in Europe that saw the corruption of the Roman Catholic Church, like Luther. Luther was the big one, but there's others who are calling some of the things that the Roman Catholic Church was doing, saying it's wrong, calling them on the carpet. And at that time, instead of the Roman Catholic Church calling a council to look at it, they basically condemned these different ones that were doing this. So basically, you had what they call the protesters, Protestants, and so instead of they exiled the Protestants, so the Protestants, they didn't want to start their own churches. They wanted to reform the Roman Catholic Church to get them back to what God was teaching from the Bible. And anyways, you had these splits. So basically, the Roman Catholics that believed you should follow the Bible, what the Bible's teaching, they became Protestants and left the Roman Catholic Church. But here's a lot of the different confessions and teachings. So the Synod of Dort was an internal battle. You had Jacob Arminius and his followers saying they understood, they connected the dots that basically you're saved by faith, and I would say plus works, that sin was not you weren't dead in your trespasses and sins. You were very, very bad off, but you were not dead. So they had their understanding. And then the Synod of Dort at that time was called, Jacob Arminius was already dead. The followers were coming saying, we want you to change your confessions to include these interpretations. And the Synod of Dort, I believe there was 118 representatives from the Reformed Church came. They heard the arguments on both sides and ended up coming up with what nowadays is called the 5 points of Calvinism, which really is basically the response from the Synod of Dort against the Arminius view of basically sin and justification. So that's kind of the historic picture. So if you want to read on the responses that the Synod of Dort had, this was basically 1618, 1619, the year when this was happening. You have the Second Helvetic Confession. This is a pretty early confession. Different church orders. The Nicene Creed. This is one of the creeds at least churches confess at least once in a while. Our church, or my church, confesses this probably once every couple of months, 3 months, 4 months. We do the Apostles' Creed. We do the Athanasian Creed once in a while. So, and in the Nicene Creed, you have the first Nicene Creed, which was 325, and then later on, I think it was 70 something or other, where it's the Nicene Constantinople Creed. So basically, it was a revised, and so what today is considered the Nicene Creed is not really the Nicene Creed; it's the Nicene Constantinople Creed. Anyways, there's a lot of history stuff in here that's good to read. And then the last, we got early church. You can read the early church fathers. And then the other thing is good. We'll get out here. Besides creeds and confessions and the early church, you could read the church fathers, which is really good if you want to do study on them. The last one is theology. And this is how to, again, it's the understanding that there is a kind of a grid to understanding the Bible. There's a God. If you stand back, there's this, I guess the best way to explain this is when you have a puzzle, you have all these pieces and you're trying to put them together right. The systematic theology is kind of like the idea of the box top of the puzzle. It gives you the full picture. It's organized. It helps you organize the information that's within. So what systematic theology is, if you're trying to understand the Bible as a whole, there's a bunch of different topics, but they're interconnected. So one of the things that systematic theology does is studies topics. So you pick a topic and you will go from Genesis to Revelation, depending where it's found in the Bible. And the systematic theologians are trying to put together concepts that run through all of Scripture. So basically, it's trying to connect Scripture and give you a picture, so you don't have this thing. What I see today is from more modern churches. They have a disconnect between the Old Testament and the New Testament. They don't see the connection. Like in the Old Testament, there's types and shadows, and in the New Testament, there's fulfillment and clarity to stuff that was not clear in the Old Testament. The deity of Christ. You see these types and shadows of the angel of the Lord. There's other things about, like Genesis 1:26, where man was created in the image of God, but he talks about plural there. Anyways, and then you see in the New Testament where it clearly says that Jesus is God, but it doesn't explain how, the idea of, if there's one God clearly in the Old Testament, even in the New Testament, how the Father is that God, the Son is that God, and the Holy Spirit. So this is where the theologians come in and try to explain how that can be. So there's that kind of those kind of concepts. Anyways, there's in here you can look at the different through the history of the church. There's certain people that made great helped explain things better for the church. So you have Anselm, he was a theologian. You have Thomas Aquinas, which is usually the Roman Catholics' top theologian. He was a very smart guy. Let's see who else. Let's see if I wrote them out. Nope, I didn't write them out. Let's see what else. Oh, you got Jacob Arminius. You want to study on Arminianism, the works of Jacob Arminius. You have Augustine, St. Augustine. He's probably one of the smartest guys that came to the church. Didn't always get everything right, but there's a lot of stuff he did get right. And it's funny, both the Protestants try to claim him and also the Roman Catholics try to claim him. So he's kind of a mixture of bag in the sense of his stance. So sometimes he supports where the Roman Catholic theologians get some of their information is from St. Augustine, and vice versa, also with the Protestants, some of their stuff that they hold to.
Yeah. Okay.
Augustine.
All right, Thayne.
Yeah.
All right, keep going. I'm going to step away just for a moment. I'm going to turn off my camera, but I want to grab something I want to share with the audience. So just keep talking. I'll be back in a moment. All right.
Okay. I'm just trying to see anything else that we can kind of some of the church scholars here. None of that. I was going to say John Calvin. I know that there's Calvinism out there, and it's either a love or a hate for Calvinism. But one of the things, John Calvin didn't come up with Calvinism. Calvinism was developed later on because of Jacob Arminius. Calvin was already dead. But Calvin had these teachings. Again, he was one of the few historic figures that was fluent in both Greek and Hebrew. Plus, he was fluent on the church calendar, and so he wrote a lot of good stuff. So his Institutes of the Christian Religion, basically, I think there's either 3 or 4 books, but he did a really good job of explaining things. It's again, and he also wrote commentaries on, I believe, on all the books of the Bible. So he was very influential in the sense of directing the church, and his stuff, even though it's, he wrote it back in the 1500s, there's still some gems there that usually a lot better than most of the scholarship today. I mean, not all the scholarship, but good chunk of the scholarship. Anyways, let's see what else. Should have wrote these down so I could just go through them, because there's some I'm trying to get to. There's one guy that I really enjoy. He's a older theologian. Okay, Jonathan Edwards. There's some stuff that's pretty good with him, and there's some stuff that's kind of off. And you got to sometimes be careful. Finney, Billy Graham likes Finney, but Finney, there's something he did on, I want to say justification, where I want to say Christ's, his sacrifice or his crucifixion didn't pay for something. So he's got some really fundamental issues in his theology, but a lot of people like Finney, Charles Finney.
Uh,
Harnack, he's more of a liberal theologian, so watch out for him.
Now, what do you think of some of the Puritan writers?
I'm getting to them.
Okay.
I think a lot of them are pretty good.
All right. Well, I do have a
Okay,
video. I
wait,
do have a.
hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
Charles Hodge. This, you can get his systematic theology book for free. It's online. What I like about him is for a theologian, he's very easy to read. He explains sometimes very complex things, pretty simple for at least the layperson. I don't know how many people are going to watch this that know theology, but theology has its own kind of language, and there's certain theologians that they're right to the point. If you don't know their language, it's hard to understand exactly what they're trying to say. Charles Hodge is usually very, and I won't say simple, but much easier to understand, and he explains things. And I just found him, a year or two ago, started reading some of the things he wrote, and I thought, boy, he makes things easy to understand for those who don't have a strong theological background and language and stuff. So I would highly recommend him. Anyways, that is the Christian classics. There's a bunch of literature here you can go through and look at things. And so that was my third website.
Okay.
And I'm
Yeah.
done.
The other one that I was going to recommend, it's in the notes there. All the links to these sites are in the show comments. So I'm going to go ahead and just skip going through that one for the sake of time tonight. But they have a lot of similar features. But what I did want to share is this DVD series right up here. And it's a pretty big, goes through a lot of the different Puritans here, and it is DVD driven, along with let me just see. It comes with it comes with DVDs that are still in the box, and it goes through a lot of the Puritans, and it comes, of course, with two books that you could that also go on added information about the Puritans, and with additional notes and things of this nature. I highly recommend getting the series, and so that I'll try to put a link in the show notes to where this could be ordered. Um, but yeah, I'd recommend this. And another one too, a series that I would recommend going through. Our church is going through it at the moment. Behold Your God. Again, it's rethinking God biblically, and then a lot of the authors, Paul Washer and others, are up here. I don't know how to make this any bigger, but I'll try to find a way to put this a link to where it can be ordered. You can look at it more closely online. Uh, for those that like watching, and you got a lot of good information about things that how to read and do things in terms of the website tools. But some of the authors that you mentioned, the Puritans and Reformed authors, I'd recommend those two DVD series too, for those that are more visual and auditory type learning as well. Can get a lot of good information on the authors of some of the commentaries and so forth. So, all right. Okay, thank.
All right, Jeff.
All righty.
Are we finishing up?
In just a moment, I noticed we got at least one or two people here in the room. Does anybody want to come on up? I'll put the show, put a show link up here, and or you can just type anything in the comment section here, and so if you want to come on up, just click on the link. Nothing has to be installed. Everything's online. Just click on the link, put your name in there, and enter the studio. Nothing to install like Zoom. I can see if you've come on up. We just want to give anybody in the audience, if you got any questions or comments and you don't want to come up, then just type it in the chat room there. If you want to come up and don't want to be seen, then just don't click on the camera. Just use your microphone, and you look like this, and we'll entertain you either through the chat or through the live room. If you do it through chat, I can put it up here like this so we can see your chat, and that way you can comment that way and we can read it. So just want to give anybody a chance out there that's interested in coming on, so, or somehow communicating with us. All right. So alrighty, I'll give a minute or so, and then all right, Thayne. So I liked the stuff you went through, and so
All right.
and so all right. I guess no one's gonna come up and somehow either in the chat room or not. So yeah, move this back over here. Alrighty, guys. All right, Thayne, you want to close up in prayer, and we'll end the show for tonight. Thanks for those who are watching with us live. Thanks for hanging in this long, and we promise that the next time we have Thayne on, we're gonna break the record and go for 3 hours. What do you think, Thayne?
I'll try. Whatever you want, Jeff. I was just trying to cover the subject.
Hey, I know let's just get it all out in one shot. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah.
Well, I try to go through my notes, but this one was a little bit harder because I should have put a little bit more details in the notes. Anyways, you want to pray?
Yeah, well, it's there.
Oh.
Go ahead. I'll let you close up in prayer, and then you can, and then
Okay.
we'll. Go ahead.
Heavenly Father, we come in your name of your Son Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit. Thank you for allowing us to talk about the topic on online Bible tools, Lord, and pray that. Thank you for having them on these different websites. Thank you for these websites offering them free. Pray that you would draw Christians to use them, at least more of the baby Christians in the sense of using them. Help them to understand the different tools that are on these websites, use them effectively, Lord, and that you would bless them from the studies that from these tools, help them gain in knowledge and to grow as Christians, Lord, and to magnify your name and your Son. And through the Holy Spirit, help them grow. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Yeah, and go ahead and visit the comment section below. We have links to a lot of the things that are mentioned, and I'd recommend for further information about commentaries and different Bible translations that you visit our newsletter at the end of the list there. It's got some good information there about commentaries and so forth. Alrighty. All right. Well, that's going to be it for tonight. I don't have any special music at the end or anything, so we're just going to go ahead and end.
You're not going to do your famous tap dance?
I'm not going to get on and repeat that show.
How about your busting your moves, whatever? Hickman or whatever. Yeah.
Not that video again.
Well, you didn't give the answer to your joke or whatever.
Oh, okay. I'll give the question again. How many of each type of animal did Moses bring on the ark? So no one threw that in the chat. I'll throw that again. I'll give it a moment. Then I'll let you answer it, Thayne.
Yeah, like I know the answer.
Okay, well, you should. Okay, so no one's putting it in the chat. You want to take a stab at it? Thayne?
2.
All right. Wrong answer.
That's what I thought. I don't know.
Okay, well, the question is, how many of each type of animal did Moses bring on the ark? 0, because it was Noah, not Moses.
Oh, walked into that one. Wow.
Okay. All right, guy. I got to have at least one dad joke a night. So,
All right, Jeff.
okay. All right, guys. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, and for those that jumped in and out. And okay, all right, thing. We'll catch you next time around.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, just one more thing. On November 1st, Monday night, November 1st, we're going to be having a guest on that night who will be dealing with modalisms, or modalism, and their misuse of the church fathers. Okay. We have as our guest tonight Matthew Bartell. He's got several master's degrees, including one related to church history. So we're going to have that on that night, start at 7 o'clock, Monday, November 1st. So, and we may not have a show next month or next Saturday or Monday. I guess some things happening and so forth. So our next show probably will be November 1st, Monday, November 1st. So, okay, guys. All right. We will until November. We will be back up and running then. So, okay, Thayne, thanks for your time.
Okay.
All
God
right.
bless.
Okay. See you
Good
then.
night.
Bye.
Bye.